Oh my gosh, this missionary suit just does not fit me anymore. This Mormon missionary suit that I used to wear just, I mean, as you can see, I've gotten fatter over the years. I can't fit in the suit. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take it off. I'm going to take it off. Oh my goodness. That feels so much better. Yeah, that's right. I used to be a Mormon missionary back when I was 19, 20, 21 years old. I was a Mormon missionary. Yes, this is the actual name tag I wore, Elder Durfee. Here's a photo of me on my mission in Connecticut. That photo's taken somewhere in Connecticut where I served my mission, and as you can see, just like every young Mormon missionary, I was taking myself way too seriously. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. Today, I'm going to be reviewing two fantastic nonfiction books, true crime books about murders that happened in Salt Lake City in 1985. And I'm telling you, these books are dynamite. Mormon Murders and A Gathering of Saints. When I was on my mission in Connecticut, the bishop of the congregation stood up and read a letter from the prophet that said, there are two books that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are not recommended to read, not allowed to read. Two new books that have come out. Those books are called Mormon Murders and A Gathering of Saints. And it is advised the Mormon members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints do not read these books. Well, as a young missionary, I was like, someone tell me not to read a book, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read it. The very next day, I went out and bought my copies of those books that our prophet told us not to read. Mormon Murders and A Gathering of Saints. You might be wondering, what is it about these two books that would make it so the prophet of the church would recommend that the members not read it? Well, these books are about a young man named Mark Hoffman who was a serial killer in Salt Lake City in the 1980s. He killed people by using bombs. Not only was he a killer, but he was also a master con artist and forger of rare documents. He's still alive today, Mark Hoffman. He's serving a life sentence in the Utah State Prison. One other thing you might be asking me is, hey, Durfee, you've mentioned in your videos before that you work at the Utah State Prison and you've worked there for 13 years. Yes, I've worked there in various positions in 13 years, the mental health unit, the gang unit, the intake unit. Currently, I teach life skills classes. I used to run the libraries in the prison. Do I know Mark Hoffman, the serial killer that these two books are about? Yes, I do. I've ran across him a lot. I've talked to him several times. See him on a regular basis inside the prison. So it's kind of interesting to know that life has kind of come full circle to when I was a little missionary in Connecticut, reading about Mark Hoffman and his murders, to now knowing the man and seeing him almost daily on a daily basis in the prison. Does he talk about his crimes? No. We've had a lot of famous people come through the Utah State Prison. Ted Bundy, Mark Hoffman, Warren Jeffs, Gary Gilmore, just a lot of, I mean, the list could go on and on and on. And, just as remaining a professional, I do not talk about the crimes of these individuals. We don't discuss them with them. I mean, you just don't. You just don't do that. But you're aware of it. You're aware that they're a famous killer, right? It's obvious that everybody knows. Another thing about this, the reason I am reviewing these right now is because if you don't want to read these two books, and we'll get to the reviews of these two books in a second. If you don't want to read these two books, that's fine, because Netflix just came out with a 3-part series about these murders and and Mark Hoffman and all the documents that he forged. And we're going to get into the documents he forged a little bit and why he started to be a murderer and all that. But Netflix did a Fantastic. I mean, it's Netflix, so you know it is spectacularly put together. In fact, the documentary was made by the same guy who made Napoleon Dynamite and that wrestling movie with Jack Black. I can't remember that. So the guy he's a movie making genius, and he put this documentary together about Mark Hoffman and the murders that happened in 1985 in Salt Lake City. So if you want to go to Netflix, just go to Netflix and type in "Murder Amongst the Mormons" and watch that documentary. I watched it. It is dynamite. It's dynamite. Everything in the documentary that you could possibly want. The books, the document, why not do all three? This book, and the documentary. What are these books about? So Mormon Murders was written by 2 Harvard professors. And it was a true crime nonfiction book about Mark Hoffman and the murders that he committed. And then A Gathering of Saints was by Robert Lindsay. And these were both bestsellers at the time. And like I said, back when I was on my mission, the Mormon Church did not want people to read these. And there's a reason why. There's a big reason why. The Mormon Church had every bishop in every congregation stand up and read a letter from the prophet saying, "Thou shalt not read these books if thy is a Mormon." And of course, I went out and bought them the next day. I was a very good missionary. I will say that. I was never a very good Mormon. Excellent missionary. Bad one. In fact, I'm wearing my Yale t-shirt right now because I was serving on the Yale campus. That's the bishop of the Yale congregation was the one that read that. So that's where I was at the time. Mark Hoffman in the Mormon Church, serial killing, bombings, and document forgery. What is this all about? Mark Hoffman was a con artist. Mark Hoffman found a lot. His job was, he was a rare documents dealer. His job was to go search for rare documents. It didn't matter whether it was stuff from Charles Dickens. It didn't matter if it was old writings of Shakespeare. It didn't matter if it was old letters that George Washington or Abraham Lincoln had wrote. It didn't matter if it was old coins and weapons from the Civil War. It didn't matter if it was money from the gold rush. It didn't matter if it was religious documents from the Catholic Church, Mormon Church, whatever. He was a finder and dealer in rare documents. And he was a superstar. In fact, he was the Michael Jordan of rare document dealing. He lived in Salt Lake City. He was a Mormon missionary just like me. He was a faithful Mormon when he was doing this. But he got himself into trouble, folks. And the trouble was that he was making so many deals and had getting so many financiers to finance the purchase of these documents that he was in heavy debt to these financiers. And he couldn't find and sell documents quick enough to pay the people back. And so he was forging stuff, and he became a master forger. He just learned how to forge things to make them look exactly like they were from the time period that they were supposed to be. And he would sit in his basement with chemicals and electrical wire and lighters and little and things that could, in little fish tanks that he would sit the documents in and do stuff chemically to them to make them look like they were aged. And he was forging. He's like, well, hell, it's fucking easier to forge this shit than actually go look for it, right? So he started forging a bunch of stuff and selling it to the highest bidders. And people were getting it authenticated by, the FBI was authenticating him as a real. People that dealt in rare documents authenticated everything that he'd forged was real. So this guy was onto like a scam, right? And he was still getting himself into more debt. And like, hey, I need someone to give me $300,000 because I'm about to find this great document and like the Oath of the Freeman, I've just about found it, but I need $300,000 to keep, and then we'll sell it to somebody for $1 million, and then we'll split the profits. So this is the kind of scam he was working on. Meanwhile, he just couldn't forge stuff fast enough. He just couldn't forge it fast enough. And one of the main people that he was dealing in rare documents was the Mormon Church. He was writing. He had gotten so he could craft letters and the penmanship of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and Martin Harris and all the old people that started the Mormon church. He got, and he would do this, and he would get it. He would sell. He would bring it to the Mormon church or the people that were dealing. So this is where the murders start. This is where the murdering starts. Okay, folks, this is where the murdering starts. Is he would have these go-betweens. He had these two go-betweens that would they would buy the document from him, and then they would go ahead and sell it, or either donate it or sell it to the Mormon church. And so what happened was he got these documents that, and he forged them, but they were weird. And they questioned. They were like documents from the hand of Joseph Smith, from the hand of Martin Harris, people, the early leaders of the church. And these documents contradicted the history of the church. Like, Joseph Smith, if you know about the Mormon church, saw an angel. The angel gave him the golden plates, and he translated the golden plates into the Book of Mormon. Well, the documents that Mark Hoffman was forging contradicted all of that. And the Mormon church knew it, and so the Mormon church was going to pay him of money to buy these things and squirrel them away so nobody ever saw them. And that's when the murdering started. It was horrible murders. Mark Hoffman committed horrible murders using bombs. And it was a huge scare in the 1980s, these bombs that were going off in Salt Lake City. I remember I was a kid then, and it was on the news nonstop. It was national news. It was like Tom Brokaw National. This was like BBC World News. This was a big event. That's why these books were written. I mean, this was one of the biggest sort of serial killing things that had happened in the 80s, and it all boiled down, and nobody could figure out who was doing the bombings. Nobody could. Was it tied to was it the Mormon church? Was the Mormon church involved? The FBI was investigating the Mormon church. The Mormon church was accused of tampering with the investigations. I mean, this just spiraled into mayhem, and this is why these books are great. I love these books, and I've only touched the tip of the iceberg, folks. I've only given you the tip of the iceberg of just how nutty it goes. And if Netflix took the time to do a mini-series on this, it's dynamite, and you got to go watch that. Murder Among the Mormons is the Netflix show. This is Mormon Murders. This is Gathering of Saints. You can read these books. Oh, I would suggest that you do. You will not be able to take your eyes out of them. And if you watch that documentary, you're not going to take your eyes off of that either. But that's my review. I give both of these books 10 out of 10. I mean, I read these when I was a Mormon missionary, when I was told by the prophet, don't read those. Don't read those. Because the Mormon church does not come out looking good at all in this murder investigation. I mean, they hindered the FBI at every turn. And that's part of the sadistic... I mean, just how Mark Hoffman conned so many people, even the Mormon leaders. I mean, you won't believe what you're seeing. You're not gonna, how those true crime murder documentaries get you going, but like, I can't believe this is real. I mean, that's what you're gonna be thinking here. 10 out of 10 for both books. Mormon Murders, A Gathering of Saints. Read and enjoy.